All right, this is Joe Damiano on our right here.
Hello.
And he's our World War II soldier that's come to speak to us today. And this is his son, Mark, who lives in Botetourt County. We just decided 2.8 miles from my house.
That's right.
So he's going to help with the presentation some today. And Mark here gave me some interesting things about his father to share with you all that he wanted me to share. And Joe Damiano was 100 on June 7th of this year. And he's the first in his family to live that long. And his wife-to-be waited for him for 3 years to come back home from the service. And we're going to watch a movie called Best Years of Our Lives. It's part of our World War II unit. And it's about men coming home from the service to their wives and loved ones. So that same theme in that movie was lived in real life with soldiers like Mr. Damiano. This is a story that Mark told me last night. Joe here surprised his fiancée, Alberta, when he returned. She had gone shopping, and he just sort of slipped into the house where she was. He even went to see her before he went to see his parents, which I can certainly understand. I mean, I would have wanted to have seen my fiancée first if I had come back from war. And they had, Mark said his parents truly had a love story. They were an example of what married folks should be for the whole family and for friends. And Joe served 3 years in the military during the war. And when he was 18, I believe you said, was he 18 when he got on that train?
Help me, Dave. Were you 18 when you went, when you got on the train to go to California?
Possibly.
And he went from New Jersey to California, didn't know anyone on the trip, and that was how he got started in his military career. And so Mark asked, as you all remember, for us to come up with some questions, and these are the questions that you all gave to me the other day to ask. And the first question was, how did you feel when you first heard about Operation Overlord in the D-Day that was coming up? How did you first feel when that?
Trying to forget it. Didn't know what to think.
So you
didn't know what to expect. You find yourself in that situation maybe once in a lifetime. That was it. But we made it.
okay?
Yeah.
Did you make any friends with any of the Allied forces that you worked with? Did you have some close friendships with men
Not really. Not with the Allied forces.
with your people that you worked with?
Yes.
Would you like to share some of the friendships that you had?
So many of them. So long ago.
I know that they had stayed in touch with a lot of the GIs for quite, when I was young, I can remember, you even went to Myrtle Beach, you and Mom with some of them.
We've had a few reunions, which are very memorable occasions.
And you still have some friends that you stay in touch with?
Very few. There's not too many left.
And by the way, when we're talking about these, y'all can feel free to raise your hands and ask a question too as well. So what, as I understand it from your son, that you did a lot of work with supplies.
Yes.
And what kind of supplies did you work with, and what kind of supplies did you send out to your fellow troops?
Just about everything other than ammo. We didn't handle ammo, but we handled all other supplies,
Such as what, sir?
such as clothing, food, equipment, all sorts of equipment,
Okay.
a variety.
A what? So everything except the ammo type thing.
Yes.
So y'all were, that was very essential to the, I guess, to the morale and the well-being of the
Absolutely.
troops.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now here was a really good question that one of the students had. What kind of training did you go through in preparation for the war?
This is funny. We had desert training. I never did get to the desert. we trained in the Mojave Desert in California. And we thought we were going to the Pacific. We wound up in England. But that's the Army for you.
Okay. Well, that was a great question for sure. So, what did they teach? Do you remember any of the things they taught you to do if you were in the desert?
Don't run out of water.
That is amazing. Okay. What else about your training? Was there a certain weapon that you were told to specialize with, or a certain strategy or anything, sir?
Not really.
So it was just you had to be a jack of all trades with what they were doing?
Oh, I was great.
Did they do physical training as well?
Yes.
What were some of the physical things that y'all had to do?
So many. There was a variety of things.
And now, did you have to do a lot of running, for example?
Yes.
So that was part of it as well. In the packs, you remember how much the packs weighed, for example, perhaps?
Too much.
Too much. Okay. And here's another question that the students had. What were the meals? Did they feed you well? What was standard Army ration, so to speak, when you were training, and what did y'all eat?
K ration.
And what was a K ration for these folks?
You wouldn't want them. You wouldn't enjoy it.
Can you describe them?
It was edible.
It was edible.
It was so long ago I couldn't tell you what it was.
But it wasn't.
I'm trying to forget.
You try to forget that, okay? I can understand that. Now you arrived in Normandy. I think the Roanoke Times article said, and we were talking about this the other night, Mark, 4 or 5 days after D-Day. Is that correct?
That's right.
And how did you get there, and where did you go afterwards, sir?
We landed in Normandy. I think it was 4 or 5 days after D-Day. It's Cherbourg. And we eventually found our way to Paris. As the front moved, we found ourselves in Paris. And that's where we were headquarters, in Paris. And that was rough treatment, rough duty. I say that kiddingly. It was a real joy to be there in Paris. This is like being on furlough.
Because they were so thrilled to be liberated?
Yes.
And Autumn, that was what you just had, Autumn just presented what he was doing after as part of her PowerPoint for class. I saw your hand go up, Autumn, go ahead.
Yes, I did some research on Operation Cobra, and which was, from my resources, told me that it was like 7 weeks after D-Day, and how, like, looking at the pictures from when France was liberated, like, just seeing the pictures of all the excitement and the joy from all the people, like, was that just a huge time and, like, really big joy for you, too?
Certainly was.
Yeah.
Certainly was. Indescribable.
Dad, how long were you actually at Normandy?
Normandy? We weren't there too long because we moved into Paris as the front moved in. Paris was finally liberated, and we had our headquarters in Paris.
Okay. I know you've told the family in the past that y'all set up on the beach at first when you first got there.
Pardon?
You set up on the beach when you first got there. And I know you said you you could hear the fighting off in the distance, but y'all were never in danger.
So you were on the beach at Normandy,
Yes.
and I guess the destruction, what was that like to see that mass destruction? Ezekiel did a PowerPoint on that, and he was talking. Do you want to share that with what you've done, Ezekiel?
Yeah, I did a presentation on D-Day itself and talked about how hundreds of thousands of soldiers arrived on D-Day, but their chances of survival were fairly low, and only maybe 100,000. Well, 100,000 passed in D-Day.
So you saw that remains of that destruction, didn't you, there?
Yes.
And that must have been very hard to experience.
Indescribable. Hope we never see anything like it again.
Yeah, Ezekiel did a good job explaining the devastation and the loss of life. And it must have still been very visible for that
Yes.
shorter period of time afterwards.
Yes.
All right. Did y'all have anything else to add that y'all wanted to ask him based on what y'all's research was?
Well, me and Zeke actually worked together on the D-Day projects, like, as itself, because I did after D-Day and then he did during and before D-Day. And, like, one of my questions was, like, how was your initial, like, feeling or, like, response to D-Day itself? Like, that was,
Huh?
because I can't even imagine what you felt like hearing
Did you
about,
lose any
you know,
friends during the
this
war?
operation and then, you know, going forth with it and how you could even feel, because it was such a low chance of survival. I mean, because the casualties were so high.
It just went along with the flow.
Yeah.
You had no choice.
Did anybody else want to ask something? Ryan is very knowledgeable about the weapons from the time period. That's what he did his PowerPoint on. You wanted to ask him some questions, Ryan, about what kind of guns he was trained with?
Yes. So, what weapon were you trained with in basic training?
The rifle.
Rifle?
I didn't have any extensive training in, other than rifle.
What kind of rifle did you were y'all trained with?
I couldn't really tell you.
So, Brian, you wanted you mentioned what was the standard one that they were training soldiers with many times?
Was it the M1, they called it?
M1.
Yep.
That's right.
All right, this is question 8 from the young people. What is something you will never forget about the war or D-Day? What are some pleasant memories, perhaps, or not so pleasant memories from that time period?
I'm trying to think back that far. I'm sure a lot of thoughts went through my mind. My family. The people I left behind, the loved ones.
Your family.
Yes. Quite an experience. It's difficult to talk about it.
And we respect that. I can imagine. And let's see here. So, what is some advice? Here's a question for. What is some advice for someone wanting to go into the military today? Do you have any advice? Because the military is often regarded as a very good career for young people. What advice would you have for somebody going into the military today?
I think it would be a great experience for any young person that so desires to join the military, to have the experience. It's an experience they'll never get anywhere else. It's a lifetime experience.
Okay.
A worthwhile experience.
Okay. Now, did you take advantage of the GI Bill that came after? That's something else we studied.
I did.
Or how did you do that,
I
sir?
did with some schooling,
Okay.
yes.
Y'all know about the GI Bill?
Yeah.
So, and what a great thing that was for the government to support the men and women who came back. So you got some additional education
I
through the
sure
GI Bill.
Sure did.
And did that help with your career after?
It sure did.
Could you tell how it helped?
I spent about 40 to 45 years in the insurance industry. My son Mark followed my example. He also became an insurance person.
Okay.
He was with Nationwide. I was with the John Hancock and with the Prudential, both companies, and had great experience.
So the GI Bill got you the training to go into that field?
Pardon?
The GI Bill got you the training to go into the insurance field?
In a way, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pay for your education?
Mhm.
All right, wonderful. Did you write letters home to your fiancée very much?
All the time. All the time. Look
So-
forward to receiving them.
And how long sometimes did it take to get those letters back? That was something else. Students,
I've lost track.
you lost track of that.
Too long.
Too long.
I have told Dad, the modern military have with the computer, they can actually see their loved ones and talk to them, and it just blows his mind. Yeah, it's,
An old-fashioned letter.
yeah.
All right. Here is another great question from the students. Where were you and what were you doing when you heard that the United States had won the war in Europe? Where were you at the end of the war when, and who did that was you again, Autumn. So, Autumn, you want to go over the end of the war just quickly and then talk about that?
Yeah, so from like all my research, like officially the war itself in Europe ended, hold on, by May 7th, by Hitler's successor, like that he had signed an unofficial like surrender. So like when you heard that initially, what was your first like thought initially?
Going home.
So did you do anything else, like, not just in the European War? Did you go home after the European War itself ended?
Eventually.
Yeah.
All right, that is a good question. So how long after the soldiers didn't all of a sudden go home after the war ended? So how long did you stay there in Europe after the war ended? Do you recall?
I can't recall.
Okay. So you must have been
It's
there
been
a
a
while.
long time ago.
Long time ago, yes. All righty. Here's another question. This is going back before the war. What were the living conditions like in, I think the student said in boot camp. Can you talk about what boot camp living conditions were like?
It's what you would expect in boot camp. A lot of guys wondering what's going to happen to them, where are they going, what can they expect, wondering about your family back home. It's an indescribable feeling that you have. You're so far from home and from the people you love. Here you are among 200 strangers that sometimes you have to depend on them to get you out of a jam. You know they're going to do it.
So you had faith in your fellow soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what was it like? We know that you wanted to see your fiancée more than anything else, which all of us, I can certainly understand that. So what was it like when you got home? Were there crowds? Were there parades? What was it like when you got home?
No parades.
No parades.
No hero coming back. It was a great feeling. It was a great feeling. Looking forward to getting married. I think we were married within maybe 2 weeks
Really?
of returning. We had corresponded all of these years I was gone. And had a great life together. Here's the result, one of the results.
This was called the what? Y'all did a PowerPoint on that as well. What was it called? What was the baby boom? There we go. All right. Mark here's a baby boomer. So am I for that matter. But anyway, we're both 70. So, all right. Besides being with your fiance, this was the last question the students had before. Hopefully we open up to any additional questions they might have. Besides coming back to your fiance and starting your life, what did you most want to do outside of that? Was there, go to a restaurant, go dancing? What is it that you most wanted to do when you got back, besides being with your fiance and your family?
I was perfectly content with being with the family and people I loved. People you were forced to be away from for so long. Nothing greater. Just being back home. It's a great feeling.
I'm sure it was. All right. Would any my students like to ask some additional questions about anything? Colin.
What were your favorite musical acts back then?
That is a great question, Colin.
What were your favorite musical acts of that time?
I'm sorry.
Musical performers, like the Andrews Sisters, for example, and Boogie Woogie Boogie Bugle Boy.
What about it?
I should have had y'all listen to the Andrews Sisters before we came in.
No, they're asking who your favorite ones, Dad.
Performers and songs.
And your sisters were one of them.
See,
Absolutely.
have y'all heard the song? I can't even pronounce it sometimes. It's all that alliteration. Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. Have y'all heard that song?
I've got it on my phone when they're done.
Yeah, we'll listen to that tomorrow. I promise that. Who did 1940s music?
I did.
All right, so Colin, that makes sense. So, were there any other besides the Andrews Sisters? Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Artie Shaw, those type.
Artie Shaw, Benny Goodman.
Those are some of your favorite artists. Did you have a favorite song from the time period?
So many of them. I can't think of one offhand.
All right.
My parents love music and dancing. Absolutely, both of them.
Do you remember a certain dance that was your favorite to dance with your wife?
We used to belong to the 200 Club. That was a club a dance club that we had there in Salem. And we'd have big bands.
The big band era. Mm-hmm.
We'd have some of them come to play for us. It was a great time. Big time.
To go dance to big band music.
Yeah.
The swing?
Yeah.
The swing. Colin, did you have anything to follow up with, sir?
No, I didn't think I'd get that far.
Okay. All right, anybody else have a question? Brian?
So, when the war in Europe ended, were you asked to go possibly serve in the Pacific?
Pardon?
When the war in Europe ended, was there anybody who told you may possibly serve in the Pacific?
Was there a chance that you would have gone and served in the Pacific Theater after the war in Europe ended?
No way.
No, you were done, huh? You wouldn't have volunteered for that.
Oh, no way.
You've done your time.
Absolutely.
All right, great question, Ryan. Of course, how many more months after the war in Europe before the war in Japan ended? You don't know? It was May. It was over by the summertime. In the summer, I think, was when Japan. It wasn't but a couple months, right? Yeah, after the two atomic bombs. How about the any of the visitors? Would y'all like to ask a question? Any of you visitors? Yes.
So I understand you just turned 100. What's the secret to longevity?
What is the secret to your long life?
I'm trying to figure it out. Whatever it was, it's working.
The Roanoke Times did an article on Dad for Memorial Day, and the question was asked similar to that. And Dad's reply was, if I'd known I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Dad, one thing that you can talk about is the family that you live with in England, I believe, that you got really close with.
Mr. and Mrs. Thresher. Very, very nice couple. They had no children of their own. And they were obligated to take in 4 GIs like myself into their home. And we lived with Mr. and Mrs. Thresher for several months before going into, before D-Day. They were wonderful people. They had no children, and we spent many a Sunday afternoon drinking tea, English tea, answering their questions about the U.S. They were very, very interested in the United States. They're great people. I think a whole lot of the English people. They're a brave bunch. They're not Italian, but they're great.
Damiano is Italian, in case you hadn't figured that out.
Yeah, actually, Dad's father came over by himself at age 16 from Italy. It just blows my mind, not knowing anybody.
Did he go through Ellis Island?
Yes, yeah, sure did.
And y'all know where Ellis Island is? Where's that? New York City. A lot of immigrants came to America through Ellis Island.
Mhm.
And your family's one of them.
Yeah.
All right, other questions from anyone here? We have about 5 minutes left. Anybody, adults or young people have?
I'm his granddaughter.
All right.
And growing up, he had lots of stories about that family he lived with. So they were really good to him. I remember one time we were at the hospital for something and we went to get soup, and the soup reminded him of a soup that they cooked for him, and he went into great detail about how loving they were. So they didn't just take him in. I think they kind of adopted him for that period of time. And we have the same birthday too, so that's pretty cool. We've shared that my whole life, so it's been
Very
an
good.
honor.
All right, other comments or questions? All right, would it be all right if they got to shake his hand or something like that? Or?
Well, I don't see why not. Although I've kind of quit doing that with COVID, but that's okay. Dad, would you like to shake the students' hands?
Sure.
There you go.
If y'all would like to come up and maybe say thank you for your service, if you want to.
It's not necessary.
Okay.
I appreciate it, and I know how they're thinking. And it's so nice of you to come here to spend some time with us. So nice of you. I know you have more important things to do.
No, this is the most important thing we've done all year. So we've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh, wonderful. It's been my pleasure, believe me.
Well, let's give him a round of applause for coming. Well, Mark here asked me to give y'all some information about his dad. He turned 100 on June 7th of this year, and he's the first in the family to live that long. Mark's mom, his wife, waited for Joe for 3 years to come back from World War II. And lots of servicemen and women waited for future spouses to do the same. We're going to watch a movie in a week or two called The Best Years of Our Lives, and it's about 3 returning servicemen who come back to wives and girlfriends and try to pick up their lives afterwards. And so I see that sort of life imitating art here type of thing. Mark also told me a story last night when we were talking about how Joe here surprised his fiancee when he returned. She didn't know he was coming back.
That's correct.
And your dad, you want to say exactly what, did he sneak into her house or?
I'm not sure. I just remember the way the story went that that Mom had been shopping, and that wasn't surprising to us that no Mom. But either you were at the top of the stairs or Mom was, and she just, needless to say, just couldn't believe it.
That he was home?
Yeah, he didn't let her know, and he actually went to see Mom before he even went to see his parents.
And I can understand that. I would want to see my spouse if I were. I'm sure y'all would feel the same way. You want to see your parents, but your future wife or husband would be somebody that you would want to see a whole lot as well. And Mark said that his parents were truly a love story and an example for the family of what a great marriage is.
No doubt.
And Joe, as I said, was served 3 years in the military, and he got on a train when he was 18 and went from New Jersey to California, didn't know anybody, and that was how his training got started.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to ask now the questions that you all in First Block came up with for Joe Damiano. And I want y'all, just like in class, when y'all, if y'all want to interrupt, please do that. And if you can think of any questions, and Anna and Abby especially, with y'all's hard work on preparing for this, they did a joint PowerPoint on D-Day and afterwards. And he was involved with, of course, the supply line after D-Day. So the first question the students had for you is, how did you feel when you first heard about that D-Day was coming up in Operation Overlord? How did you first feel when the news of that came to the troops?
Didn't know what to expect. Didn't know what it meant.
Was it top secret? I guess it was top secret, wasn't it?
Not when we finally found out.
Not when you finally found out. Did you have some close friends that you worked with among your? Did you have some particularly strong relationships with some individual men that you worked with? Who were your best friends? The students wanted to know. That you served with for several years.
Several. Very close people.
And can you do you remember who your best friend was, perhaps?
Willie Ruane.
Wayne?
Willie Ruane.
Okay.
I could name 5 or 6 of them. I was very close to these people for years.
Are you still able to keep in touch
No.
with any of them?
No, lost track.
Lost track.
I know that Mom and Dad went to Myrtle Beach with at least 2 of the couples and their wives, and spent time together. And so Dad certainly stayed in contact with them as long as I can remember growing up, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the students were the third question they had for you was, what kind of supplies did you work with during the war to get out to the other troops? You were in supplies, and I think you arrived 4 or 5 days later after D-Day. And what were the supplies that you and your fellow soldiers worked with to get out to the other troops?
You name it. Everything. Everything. I can't tell you right offhand what it was.
I think you mentioned equipment, all kinds of equipment,
All kind of-
clothing,
Yeah,
food maybe, I'm guessing.
who knows?
But I believe you said earlier today that you weren't getting out any weaponry to the troops, but everything but weaponry.
Yes.
And what was your training like before the war?
We had desert training, so we thought we were going to go to the Pacific. We wound up in England. How do you figure that?
So there's no deserts in England.
No,
So was there a mix-up or a change?
no, I think they intentionally meant to keep us in suspense. I say that kiddingly.
So I think you said earlier you trained in the Mojave Desert, was that correct?
But we thought we were going to go to the Pacific. We were in California and the desert. We wound up in England. How do you figure that?
What were some of the training exercises that you were involved with, sir?
Well, it was hot, I can tell you that.
It was hot in the desert.
It was hot.
The students also wanted to know about the meals that you ate.
Mostly K rations,
And what were K rations?
packaged meals.
Dehydrated and dry?
Yeah, pre-prepared.
And were they tasty?
Some of it was.
And how did you arrive in Normandy?
By boat.
By boat. And did you go to the beach areas?
Omaha.
Omaha. And that was all right. Anna and Abby, can y'all talk about that a little bit here? And maybe ask some questions. So Omaha, wasn't that what y'all said was the worst?
It was.
It was a disaster.
Do you have y'all have some questions here about that, or something that you wanted to share?
I just kind of want to know if, like, what was some of, like, the worst things you had seen in Omaha? Because I knew you came, like, a couple days after, but I was just wondering.
They wanted to know what you saw when you arrived at Omaha Beach. They did a PowerPoint on that this week, and they said that was the worst of the landings, right? It's what from y'all's research.
Yes, sir.
And did you still see some of the destruction when you arrived there?
A lot of destruction. But we arrived there several days after E-Day. So, the fighting was inland at the time, several miles inland. as
So
I
you
recall.
saw some wrecked boats, perhaps? And
Pardon?
you saw wrecked boats, perhaps?
Oh,
And
yes, a lot of wreckage.
what was some of the wreckage you saw, sir?
You mentioned boats, yeah. Destruction.
Another thing the students had the landmines and that type of thing been removed, but
Yes.
so you didn't have to remove landmines or anything.
Oh, no. Stay away from those things.
Did y'all have some follow-ups on things from that part of your PowerPoints and research?
I can't think of anything.
Abby? All right, does anybody else have a question before I continue with what we gathered up earlier? Would y'all like to ask anything? Anybody? All right, I'll go to the next one. What are some things that you will never forget about the war? And we know you didn't have any you weren't in combat, but what were some of your warmest memories of the war?
People that I met, the civilians, the English people.
And I know you stayed with an English family.
Yes.
Could you talk about that?
Stayed with Mr. and Mrs. Thresher. They were a childless couple. I thought they were old at the time, but I realized they were pretty young. They were in their 50s. Very, very nice couple. We lived with them in their home in Taunton, England, for several months until D-Day.
So so they had troops scattered all about England?
Yes. We lived with individual families. I'm sure these people were compensated in some way by the government. They didn't feed us. They just gave us a place to stay and sleep.
Now, did you go to military training during the day then?
Yeah. And we had a mess hall to eat in. We went to, for our meals, it was Army mess.
And what was some of the training that y'all did in preparation before D-Day? Can you talk about that?
I don't know if there's any preparation whatsoever, other than to be prepared, make sure your rifle was in proper, clean and in working order. You had all your equipment.
And what was some of the equipment that y'all had to have with you?
Backpack with all your valuables in it. When you left there, you had your backpack, and that was your belongings. You put everything into it.
And were you trained in a certain pistol or rifle that you worked with?
We had a rifle, M1s.
M1 rifles.
Yeah.
Is anybody doing World War II weapons for our PowerPoints? All right, Connor, did you have any? What were some of the major weapons there? Maybe he was familiar with some of those.
The M1 Grand.
Did you use the M1 Grand?
No.
So you were trained in that. What else, Connor? Go ahead.
The M1 Carbine.
Carbine. Yeah.
You had to use that. You were trained with that as well. And I imagine even in supplies you carried a pistol all the time?
Pardon?
I said even in supplies you carried a pistol all the time, didn't you?
No.
You did not?
No.
So they were just giving you the rifles. What was Connor, do you remember what the pistols of the time period were?
The TT pistol from the Russians and Colt M1911 from the Americans.
So he said the Colt pistol was what the Americans.
I wasn't familiar with the pistols.
So they just gave you the rifles. Okay. All right. How hard was it to be, another question the students had for you is how hard was it to be away from your family?
Very, very difficult. Very difficult. But you got involved in the things you did, and you kind of wanted it out of your mind. You couldn't just sit and worry about your family and what you could be doing if you were not in service. You did what you had to do. Made the best of it.
And you stayed busy so you didn't have to think about it.
Exactly.
And the military did keep you busy, didn't
Absolutely.
they? All right. What is some advice? Here's another question from the young people. What is some advice for someone wanting to go into the military today? Many of our students here go into the military. What would be your advice about that?
If you're so inclined, it'd be a good future for you. Because the military holds a lot of great opportunities for young people today. In all branches of service. The United States takes care of their people. And anyone having any desire to go into any of the services, I'd recommend it very highly. They're doing a wonderful job, and they're well paid today.
Do you remember what you were paid for?
No, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Now, last period you said, sir, that you took advantage of the GI Bill. Do y'all know what the GI Bill was? Does anybody here know about that? Can you tell about the GI Bill and how you took advantage of that, sir?
The GI Bill was a bill, as I recall, that when we get out of service, we had possibilities of going into higher learning, even into college. You could have the government pay for all or some of your schooling, which is a great opportunity. Some of the guys took advantage of it, others, like myself, didn't. We got married, had families. As a result, one of them.
What was this called? We also had a topic on this. What was the time? What was the word for the men who came back? I'm not explaining the question very good.
The baby boom.
There we go. Thank you. Mark is a baby boomer. I'm a baby boomer. Okay, so the baby boom was part of that.
For sure.
And so where were you when you heard about the end of the war?
I was in Paris, France. Exactly where I was that day. I don't know, it was sky high somewhere. We were so enthused, couldn't believe it, knowing that you had to go back home.
And as I understand it, you were in Paris quite a while after D-Day, weren't you?
Pardon?
I said you were in Paris quite a while after D-Day, weren't you?
I don't think it was too long after D-Day.
Okay.
I was in Paris before, while the war was still on. So many years ago.
Do you remember how long after victory in Europe took place? Now, who covered that, the victory in Europe part? But that was you too, Abby, and it wasn't it? So you want to talk about that, how things wound down with that?
There were a few major battles that happened after D-Day. Were you involved in those, or were you, how did you feel about those?
Were you sitting? You were still working with supplies after D-Day to get to the troops in the battles. For example, when the troops were coming into Berlin, were you involved with getting supplies to those troops?
No.
We're not involved with that. Now, this was a question the students also had. Did you consider re-enlisting and going into the Pacific?
No way.
That was your answer last period, too.
No, thank you.
Because the war went on for how long after the victory in Europe? Y'all remember that? Not.
Very short time.
It was just a couple of months because of the two atomic bombs that were dropped. So you had no interest in continuing, and therefore you didn't serve in Korea. You didn't go to Korea. So you left the military after that. And you want to tell the students what you did after the military. You ended your military career.
I was married immediately. Almost immediately.
As soon as you got back, you got married. And then what career did you go into after that, sir?
Insurance business. Insurance sales. I spent 50 some odd years in selling insurance.
So that would have been into around 95 or 2000 or so?
I think you retired in the 80s, I think.
80.
I
retired at age 62.
83? 62?
62, I think it was.
So you've been retired for 38 years from the
38
insurance
years.
business?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I was wondering, how did enlistment compare to like your job after? Like, which one did you like better? What did you think?
Say it again, Anna, no.
How did like your enlistment compare to your career in the insurance business? Like, what did you think?
Was there any comparison between your military career and what you did in the insurance business? Is that what your question was, Anna?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever.
Did your working with people carry over to working with people in the insurance?
Yes.
So what skills did you learn in the military about working with people? I think that's what Anna was asking.
You learn to get along with people, that's for sure. You had no choice. You worked closely. You lived closely. Your quarters were always close. You couldn't be a loner. Quite an experience.
So the living conditions were very crowded? Is that what you were in the barracks and that type of thing?
We didn't think they were crowded. They probably were. You're accustomed to it.
So here was another question. What was it like when you got home? And we know that you wanted to see your fiancée, but were there certain things that you missed doing the most when you were gone?
I didn't understand your question.
What did you miss most about America
Well,
when you were gone to war?
people, my family, my loved ones. That's what I miss most.
Did you want to go to a baseball game or? No, just wanted to be home.
Yeah.
All right, did any of y'all have some questions? Anybody in the audience have a question, or a family member that y'all would like to ask?
I have a question.
Yes.
Was there like anything that you carried with you the whole time? Maybe like a charm or like something in your bag like you said you had?
A good luck charm? Did you carry a good luck charm or a lucky penny or something that you kept the whole time you were gone from home? Make pictures, mementos?
I always had pictures, snapshots, my wallet.
I think there was I'm trying to remember, Dad, some kind of book, address book maybe,
I did have a little address book.
and you still have
I
it.
still have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You wrote lots of letters. They wrote lots of letters back and forth, and we still have some of those.
I should have asked y'all to bring some of those.
My grandmother, his wife, passed away in November, and I read one at her funeral that she had written down while he was there about just basically waiting for him, that him coming back would be the best thing.
She wrote that.
She did. Those weren't the exact words, but he's just an easygoing guy. Wherever you put him, he just makes the best of whatever situation. So his experience in the Army's probably not what you could have had some speakers come in, because he's never negative, and he does. He finds the best of every situation, and he's always a family man. So if
That's very much, he didn't want to go to a party, he wanted to come home to family.
yeah, and if he went to do something, it was with Alberta. You know, they were always together, always, or with his children or grandchildren.
Can you share something, perhaps from the letters that attest to their great love?
It almost read like a poem, the one that I read at her funeral.
It was a prayer.
It was a prayer, and she was very religious, both of them are. Do you remember? I'm drawing a blank on exact, but it was about waiting, and nothing would be better than the love of being together, and it encompassed like the blessing. They just saw the blessing in each other, like the time together. And she faithfully waited for him and would have continued, I think, forever until he came back. It was a love like none other.
not what you see these days. And it's gone through our family that way because they modeled that for all of us.
Role models.
Oh, absolutely,
Mhm.
yeah. And he has a fan group wherever he goes. He lives at Salem Terrace, and he has lots of friends there that that are always with him. Everybody knows Joe. That's just his personality. So.
And that would be part of the reasons he's had a long and healthy
Yeah.
life too, isn't it?
He eats ice cream every day. But he'll tell you he's not much on sweets. I'm the only granddaughter, and so that's been special. He had 3 sons, 7 grandchildren. I'm the only girl, and we spent a lot of time together when I was growing up. And I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, and he was my first student. And I always say, if I could teach him, I could teach anybody. Because you can tell he's a jokester, and he would cause whatever trouble he could. He was the worst behaved student I've ever had, and he thought it was hilarious. And we would play school all the time. They had a pool growing up, and we were there a lot in the summer. And gosh, I don't know how many miles he's walked in his life. He's a walker. You can tell, 100 years old, no cane, no walker. He would walk their circle. He's all the time on the move. If there's bingo, he's there. He's just, like he said, he always stays busy. He does crossword puzzles all the time.
In ink.
In ink, always has.
We did crossword puzzles this week twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In ink or pencil.
Well, we were doing for competition for extra credit.
Yeah.
So it was bloodthirsty in here.
I got you. Well, you should have invited him because he takes
Yes,
it
we
very
should have.
seriously. He does them on the newspaper every day, and then he has a book.
We
that he
did it
does.
from the newspaper.
Yep.
Yeah, they were fighting for extra credit points, and it got pretty intense.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna play Wordle.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're gonna
he
teach
would-
him how to do that.
He would like that.
Yes.
Dad still does his laundry. My wife, for going on 11 years at Salem Terrace, has offered to do Dad's laundry, and he looks at her and says, "Well, you trying to take my job?" But he still does his laundry. And one thing, within the last probably 6 or 7 years, Mom just couldn't wait to tell me that Dad looked at her and said, "Thanks for waiting on me. Thanks for waiting for me." Yeah, she said that several times.
And still grateful for that.
Oh, yes.
They made the most of life once they were done waiting on him to get home. She had fur coats and evening gowns and purses and costume jewelry, and they were dancing and living life. Went to Italy, I remember that.
Two times, I think.
Did a lot of traveling after he retired. You didn't find them not together. It was very rare, unless he ran to the grocery store or something. They went everywhere together.
Who did the songs? Did we have somebody do the songs for the time period, for the PowerPoints, the music? Can you ask, Ian, can you talk about that? Ask me, do you have any questions about what his favorite songs were? So, did you have a favorite song from the World War II or a favorite performer?
So many of them.
So was there a particular performer that you liked a lot?
Sinatra comes to mind.
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
I know my parents loved the big band sound.
Benny Goodman and
We-
Artie Shaw.
Yeah, for
Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw.
many years, Mom and Dad would go for the month of February to Myrtle Beach. And my wife and myself and Aaron was just in grade school. We would go for a long weekend. I think it was usually over Valentine's Day. And so at the Radisson, where they stayed, they didn't stay at the Radisson, but it was one of the buildings on the complex. Every Saturday night, well, first of all, they had a buffet to die for. Just tremendous, but we would go to that, and then the whole lobby of this hotel, they had big band. There was an actual band came in, I think, and they all danced the night away in the lobby of the hotel. Yeah, they loved the big band sound.
And Ian, I think you'll probably cover that with your PowerPoint when you present it. All right, does anybody in the audience or among the students have a question before we? Yes.
I have another one. How old were you when you first like went into the military and stuff?
How old were you, sir, when you went into the military?
When I went into the military, I think I was 20. 20, and I celebrated my 21st birthday maneuvers in the Mojave Desert. That's how I remember. I think I was 20. Yeah.
Okay, good question, Mally, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else among the audience or the students have a question? Well, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And could y'all give him a round of
Thank you.
applause?